Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's installment of StockCharts TV. My name is Michelle Schneider, aka Mish, and it's a very exciting time for us because it's earnings season. So what we're going to do today is we're going to cover a bunch of stocks that have already reported and those that are set to report next week.
So in order to really be kind of broad-based, I thought that we would cover, as I mentioned earlier, a few that already reported. As we know, a lot of the financials have reported, a couple of the airlines. We're not going to cover everything. Walgreens reported, we will cover that. And really next week gets interesting. So what I tried to do was give you a range from commodities to infrastructure to airlines to banks to let's see what else, Netflix, some biotech, IBM, casinos, health. And this way you're going to really get a Tesla, I'm including in there. So this way you're going to get a really broad sense. And my goal, of course, is of things that have already reported, we have a setup for, but the rest are going to be the sort of either or type setup based on what happens with the earnings reports. And of course, here is our list of stocks. So let's go to the screen. So we're going to start with Walgreens here. This actually reported already. And what was so interesting about what happened, talk about earnings volatility, it started off lower and then went green. And right now we're right into the resistance here that we had the other day at 50.88. But you can see that at the same time, it took back leadership and it cleared the 50-day moving average on the momentum. So at this point now, after we have this huge move here, really literally a $5 move on a $45 to $50 stock in one day, which is pretty awesome, I would want to see some level of consolidation, something to settle somewhere between, let's say, 49 and 50, a little bit of work. Then it takes out the 50.88, and we can see what happens from there. The most recent high here is 51.93, but you can see that back when the market was doing better, it was up at 55.28, and actually even before that, it went up to 56. So I would have no hesitancy buying it above these levels, trying to find a good risk somewhere around 50, and then seeing if we can not only get to those levels, but continue to march on from those levels. Because right now we've cleared that ever important Bollinger Band, which shows you that it was resistance up until today, which now it has cleared that resistance. So it's looking pretty good. The next one that reported is Morgan Stanley. Now, the day that JP Morgan reported, it immediately came off, touched the 50-day moving average, and now is clearing the 50-day moving average in JP Morgan. But I'm interested in Morgan Stanley because, as you can see, even with the positive report, we're still under that 50-day moving average. We're not quite outperforming the SPY. And we did have somewhat of a mean reversion trade back here when it broke the Bollinger Band, but right now we're just starting to clear the Bollinger Band. So we're still really underperforming in this particular stock. But if it can clear the 50-day moving average, Morgan Stanley, again, the earnings were very, very good, then you might be more inclined to buy it over 101.75, and you could either risk to, let's say, under 95, or you can use today's low as a good risk, 97.82. But again, I would probably want to see, since it's so close, not only clear is 50-day moving average, but also get back over the red line in terms of leadership. Since I wasn't planning to do this, though, let's just take a quick look at JP Morgan, because this was sort of classic. Now, this too is underperforming, and it's still below the 50. It had shot up ahead of the earnings and, of course, hit right here almost perfectly on that 50. So even this would still be an interesting play, I think, over today's high, let's say over 163.20, with a risk to underneath the 50-day moving average. But again, you want to make sure that this looks better versus the SPY. There's no reason to buy anything with the market really into resistance right here, that anything that's underperforming the SPY, plenty of opportunity to buy things that are in line with the SPY or outperforming the SPY. So let's go on to the next one that's already reported. Well, actually, I'm not sure if this is already reported. This is Schwab. Well, a couple of things is I think this might report actually this week. Maybe by the time you hear it on Friday, this will have already reported, but it's very interesting. So here's what I was telling you. This is already outperforming the SPY, and the momentum has finally cleared the 50, although it's weak compared to the price. So in a situation like this, where you had a high right at the Bollinger Band when it got a little overbought, it doesn't really pay to get into this unless it breaks out to new highs. And if it does break out to new highs, of course, you have to be somewhat nimble, but that would be a move over 78.95. And then you could probably use either, if you wanted to go all the way down to the 50, that would be one thing, but I would say a better risk would be somewhere around 76. So you can risk about $3 to see if it goes from 79 up to about 85. Certainly, like I said, we have leadership going here, and the momentum could actually start playing some catch up. So keep your eyes on Charles Schwab, which also, of course, really reflects the appetite of the retail investor. Now, this is in the trucking area, or in IYT, which, by the way, I showed you last week, was showing a risk on in that it too was outperforming the SPY and continues to outperform the SPY. So in terms of those three relationships, they're all still in pretty good shape. Now, you can see what's happening here with JB Hunt. It's cleared the 50 and it's got right into resistance here at the Bollinger Band. Same thing with the actual leadership. And of course, we're not even near the 50 yet in terms of momentum. So I'd give this a little bit of time, not much, but I'd keep my eyes on this, because if this clears 172.50, excuse me, not 172.50, 174.76, with today's high being 175.30. So figure in that ballpark. If it can clear over that Bollinger Band in that area, then I think you have a very tight risk. I would simply use to the low of today with a little bit of fudge at the 50-day moving average, or around 172. So I like that. That would be about a 175.50 entry, a risk to under 172. We already have the leadership in check. And of course, what we'd be looking for is to see is if this has the chops and the market holds up to get back up near the highs at around 184. Now, these I know for sure report next week. U.S. Steel, this is Steel Dynamics. U.S. Steel, of course, is X, and that's made a big pop off the lows. But actually, Steel Dynamics has done a little bit better. So again, we must wait for earnings because it reports next week. So there's no reason to buy ahead of an earnings report. We've moved off the Bollinger Band. We're not anywhere near the 50, but then again, we're not there on the price. And we are still showing some outperformance against the SPY. This is all good. So basically, what you could look for is after reports, if it gaps up over 64.20 or over the 50, you could just sort of follow the momentum on that, especially if the IYT is still trading above 255. And on the flip side, if it doesn't report well and it sells off, but it holds somewhere around 56, 57, and it starts to firm up, then you have a good risk to under the 200-day moving average. So you want to keep your eye on the momentum to make sure it keeps going. You want to keep your eye on the leadership to make sure it still outperforms. And it will clear if it clears over the 50-day moving average and goes that way, which is what I like a lot better. It would also clear this top Bollinger Band, showing now that it's breaking out from resistance. Now, we already had Delta Airlines report, and that met a tremendous amount of selling yesterday. But next week, we have United Airlines reporting. And it looks very similar to what we just saw with JB Hunt, which is essentially that it's right into the resistance here, below the 50-day moving average. Here's your Bollinger Band resistance. It's outperforming the SPY, but the momentum isn't exactly wowing anybody, but there's no divergence either. So this is another one I would be very interested in, especially since U.S. Steel is coming back and this has been doing better. And I think we can use the same plan. A good positive report that takes this over 64.20 would be, unless it reverses, you always give it a little bit of time. Remember, I did a whole video on the opening range. But if it does hold over that 64.20, you could be a buyer there. You could risk even to under, let's say, 62, very tight, to see if this has what it needs to do to get to 70 and above, all-time high there being at 74.06. Now you can see that when it was trading at 70.0406, it was completely outperforming. So it definitely needs to show some more leadership here, but this looks like in pretty good shape. So this is another one I would write down these numbers and wait for the reports to come out. Now, Silvergate just made a huge move up, and we've had ownership in Silvergate for a while. It's been kind of a frustrating trade going up and down, but this is a classic example of wading through all the months of consolidation that we had here going back. And once it cleared really 125, it was off to the races, and it clicked up to a high of 175. That's a $50 move. That's not a bad move for this stock. You can see at the same time the leadership started to explode. The momentum, I wouldn't exactly say has exploded. It's actually kind of sort of going sideways here, but that makes sense because this is one that also reports next week. So if it reports well, it drops close to 130. You would have a great opportunity to get in against that 125. However, if it does come in higher after earnings, very simply, you'd want to be looking at this over 179.21, which is where the Bollinger Band is. The all-time high in this one, by the way, is 187.86. So if you got in over there, I'd probably have a much tighter stop to see if not only it can get through these highs, but go on to make new highs. And this has a cryptocurrency component to it, by the way, which is another reason why you want to keep your eye also on Bitcoin, which right now has been consolidating and holding over 57,000. Next one is freight. This is Kansas City. And you could see with Kansas City, it's already going up because of IYT. And I think this is really reflecting the hope of an infrastructure package. However, we haven't quite gotten there in momentum through the 50. We are seeing leadership right into resistance, but we clear the resistance. So you see what I'm talking about here. When you get over this price Bollinger Band, that's a good sign. So if you wanted to get into it, by the time you hear this, actually will be, who knows where it'll be, but let's assume now it holds above this 50-day moving average. That's your consolidation before it popped. You could risk to under 283, but let's make sure that we don't wind up paying too much. So if it trades up to 296, 295, 296, it will clear all of that. That's probably what I would wait for after reports. Over 295, 296, then you can choose a different type of risk parameter. But again, if we look at the all-time high in this one, it's 314. So that gives you an opportunity to see this go much higher too. And I think any kind of passage of infrastructure will help. Now, Netflix is one I gave you ages ago. We made a really good trade in Netflix and we're not in it anymore. So that means the earnings for me is going to be somewhat interesting. Now, we did get a reversal pattern off the highs with a mean reversion because it made a new high, the next day an inside day, and then closed lower. So technically, we could see some kind of major correction, which could be a buy opportunity. So if we look at a 10% move, that could bring it back down to under 600. And if that were the case, that would be very tempting against the 50. On the flip side, if it gets through 651, where can Netflix go? That's going to be, of course, the question. But with something like Netflix, if it got over there, would be clearing not only all the Bollinger Bands, including on the monthly chart. So it would be in new uncharted territory, and that's where you don't really know. That's the classic momentum trade. So a move back under 600, probably a buy opportunity if it can get back over that 600, and a move over 650 would be like the big question mark, where could it go? Could it go to 700? Absolutely. The next one is a biotech stock, and this is Intuitive Surgical. Now, this has fallen off with the whole biotech sector, but it also reports next week, and you can see how class this was. It never got through the Bollinger Band. It started to underperform, and it broke down here at the same time under the 50. So all of the indicators, those of you who have plugins, worked really, really well. So the question is, what happens now? So right now, we're still in a down momentum. With this particular stock, and by the way, this stock can really move. I would be looking for, well, here you had somewhat of a mean reversion trade already. So I would either look for a move down to 320 and it hold, or if it breaks 320, then I would give it some time to see at our next level of support, which is really around the 300 level or 299, would probably be a good opportunity, particularly if we don't break this Bollinger Band and if we get yet another mean reversion. So I would either be looking to buy this on weakness closer to 300. And if it turned out to be the big surprise, then you could look at it over the 50-day moving average at 342, in which case you'd want to see leadership come back into it and you'd want to see this momentum pop up as well, at least back over the 200. That would give you an opportunity to get in around 342, and you can see the all-time high here was a 362, so you got at least a $20 move or perhaps higher. Now, next one is actually one I had put out a buy recommendation on the Charles Payne show at 140, and it cleared 140 and it went up, but it cleared it so fast, you actually got another opportunity here against 140. But now with earnings coming out next week, what do? So with IBM, you've got such a clear line of support here at 139.65. Unless it breaks that, this would be one I would not hesitate to go long over the new high of 146 potentially. And you could either risk to under 140, which would be a rather large risk, or you can risk to where the last round of highs was 143.56. Remember now, it would be over that 146. Watch this Bollinger Band too. Leadership is already there and momentum is improving. If this actually breaks out over that 146, so far the high we see here is 151, but I think this has been so underperforming that we could see IBM go much higher. Next one is a casino, one I've been watching and almost got into already until I realized that it reports next week, and that's Las Vegas Sands. Now, Las Vegas Sands, you can see here on the chart, is already broken out over the 50. So it's already showing some strength. It hasn't quite filled the gap here yet to 41.73. This high here is 40.88. So that gives us a good opportunity to look at this over 41.73 to 42 if it reports well, and then use the 50-day moving average as your risk. We're seeing leadership here already, and it's cleared the 50-day moving average, so the momentum is positive. This is another one that I like very much that I think could actually move up from those levels, that 42, up to at least 52, which would mean that you would have a very, very good risk reward. Next one is something that we're in, and we have to figure out what we want to do about it as we're heading into earnings, and that's eHealth. And I talked to this one, so hopefully you guys saw this on Buying the Dip segment I did last week. You could see momentum is great. It's actually clearing the 200 while this is still far from the 200, and it's showing great leadership. We have some resistance here right at the Bollinger Band, right? So if this is oversold ahead of earnings, it could sell off. If it gets back down to around 41, it's probably a buy opportunity. On the flip side, if it clears over this 47.20, I see no reason why this can't continue up, heading closer to the 200, especially, as I said, with the positive momentum. Like that one a lot too. Next one is NextEra, excuse me. And so again, this is more of a utility. We all heard about the electricity shortages, et cetera. This, of course, is interest rate sensitive, but nonetheless, it went right down to the 200 with a perfect mean reversion. Well, not quite perfect. It didn't break it in momentum, but nonetheless, it hasn't really gone anywhere yet. So this gives you a great opportunity to watch not only the Bollinger Band, but the 50. And if it gets through, let's call it 83, then I would anticipate, since it's already showing leadership, this could go up more. And of course, we want to look at the momentum here. And if it clears 83, you can see most recently it got up to a high of 87. This could also do very, very well. A couple more left. Tesla. I wanted to cover Tesla because I got asked the question is, what would you do with Tesla? Well, yesterday it broke out. It looked like it was having an inside day, and then it broke out and settled well. And here you can see now it's pretty overbought. Overbought on the leadership indicator. However, not really overbought yet on the Bollinger Bands and the real motion. We haven't even gotten to the 200. So actually the momentum compared to the price is weak. So again, this makes it kind of easy. After it reports, if it can clear these Bollinger Bands and get over 820, Well, remember, we've been above this before. If we go back just a little bit in time here, we were trading at 900 back in January of 2021. So to think that this can go from 820 to 900 is not unrealistic. On the flip side, if it doesn't report well or it sells off after the report because it's all priced in, then I would be looking for a move closer to 750. All right, now a couple left. I wanted to cover something at least more in the metal space. This is Nucor. So we already looked at STLD, also showing leadership, also showing some sense of momentum, now divergence, right at the Bollinger Band and below the 50. So that, again, that makes it easy. If it clears 104, that's the start of a good move. If it clears over the 50-day moving average, that's a continuation, and we would expect to see steel go back up. Now, on the flip side, of course, if the performance starts to wane and the momentum starts to wane and this comes in lower, then of course we would be looking at the 200-day moving average. And finally, switching to copper, FCX also reports next week. That's doing better. You can see the momentum cleared, the leadership has been good, and we cleared that Bollinger Band. And that's why I keep pointing out these Bollinger Bands to you. So actually, would I be a buyer now ahead of earnings? That would be, of course, you'd have to be relatively nimble about it. But if it holds 3650, which is where the Bollinger Band is, and we can get back closer to, at least before earnings, 40 or whatever, then you can decide whether or not you want to hold it. And if you're not in it and it holds 3650 and this gets a good earnings report and clears 40, then you've cleared all this sideways movement. And we have a high here of 45.91. This also can go much higher as well, as it's a commodity.
So that's a wrap. Hopefully you'll have some really great ideas for trading after these reports come out. And I look forward to being with you all next week, where we'll cover the next round of earnings. Have a great weekend, and thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.
Hey guys, Dave Keller here with StockCharts.com. Thanks so much for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, and we hope you did, hit the like button right below. Also, we have so much new content every day. Consider subscribing to the channel. Just hit the subscribe button in the video or right below. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Have a fantastic day.